There is a very famous poem that you've probably heard, but chances are you've got it all wrong. The poem I'm talking about is The Road Not Taken by Robert Frost. It's a well-known poem, and it's a favorite of high school English teachers and Instagram models everywhere because it's short, simple, and has a nice message of following your own path instead of just going with the crowd. Right? Well, it's not that simple. See, this is what I believe to be the most misinterpreted poem of all time, and I want to do my part as an English teacher and poet to right the wrongs and set the record straight about what this poem actually means. So, without further ado, let's get started. Okay, so before we can figure out what this poem really means, I first want to address the elephant in the room. When it comes to analyzing literature, a lot of us were taught that there's a right answer, and then when we escape the public school system, we realize that that is not the case. So then we swing to the other side of the spectrum and think that there are no right answers and that any and every interpretation of a text is equally valid. But that's not true either. Different interpretations can be more or less right. But what determines that level of rightness isn't what your teacher says or even what the author says. It's what the text itself says. If the words in the text justify your interpretation, then your interpretation is valid. The more evidence you have, the stronger your case is. So I'm not saying that my interpretation is correct per se, just that it has a lot more support from the words of the poem than the common interpretation does. So the common interpretation says that this poem is about how if you're given two choices, the popular choice or the unpopular one, you should follow your heart and go with what you believe, even if it's unpopular, because that will make all the difference. It will change your life. And sure, if we look at the last few lines, that interpretation seems to be pretty well substantiated, right? I mean, the poem literally says, I took the road less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. It's pretty straightforward, not a lot of room for interpretation. Except, it's not actually as well supported as it appears. To figure out what this poem is actually about, we need to start at the beginning and work our way through. I'm going to take each stanza and break it down into what it's showing us, just reading the words as they appear on the page, and then see where that takes us. Two roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both and be one traveler, long I stood, and looked down one as far as I could to where it bent in the undergrowth. Alright, so there's a guy standing in the woods at a fork in the road. He'd like to travel down both of the roads, but he's just one guy, so he has to make a decision. So he looks down one of the paths to see if it's any good. Then took the other, just as fair, and having perhaps the better claim because it was grassy and wanted wear, though as for that, the passing there had worn them really about the same. So this stanza is where my interpretation of the poem starts to diverge, no pun intended, from the common interpretation. Here, he decides to take path B, even though it's just as fair, because the grass isn't worn down. But then he says the paths are worn really about the same. Well, which is it? Are the paths the same, or is one actually better than the other? The speaker doesn't seem to know, and that's important. So let's put a pin in that idea so we can come back to it later. And both that morning equally lay, in leaves no step had trodden black. Oh, I kept the first for another day. Yet, knowing how way leads on to way, I doubted if I should ever come back. In this stanza, the speaker keeps thinking about that other path. He says that the two paths were equal, but then implies that he still wants to go back and try that other path, but that he isn't sure if he will ever come back because, life happens. I shall be telling this with a sigh somewhere ages and ages hence. Two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. So now we have this famous final stanza. Here, the speaker is thinking forward to how taking this path is going to affect his life. He sees himself in the future telling this story of how there were two roads, and he took the one that wasn't as heavily traveled, and how that is how he got to where he is today. So now that we've read this whole poem, what do we do with this? Well, the common interpretation is that the poem is saying that you need to be brave and go against the grain, take the path that isn't popular, the hard path. But is that actually what this poem is saying? Did our speaker actually do what people think he's saying he did? Remember that idea I told you to put a pin in? Let's bring that back out. Our speaker is indecisive and impulsive. He didn't have a great reason for choosing one path over the other. He couldn't really tell a difference between the paths to begin with, and he spent a lot of energy after the fact thinking about how he kinda wants to know what's up with the path he didn't choose. Does this sound like someone whose story you would trust? Our speaker is an indecisive guy, and honestly, the two paths were pretty much the same. He did not choose the road less traveled because the road less traveled doesn't actually exist. Okay, so why would he say that then, you might ask? Well, human brains really hate when things don't have clear causes and effects. And if we find something without a cause or effect, we fill in the gaps ourselves. And on top of that, our brains think they're really rational. We think that our decision-making has clear cause and effect. Everything we do is because we have a good reason for doing it, even if in reality we don't have a good reason for doing something. That is what is happening in this poem. The speaker clearly didn't have a great reason for choosing his path. It wasn't prettier. He said it was just as fair as the other, so he took the path because it wanted wear. It hadn't been worn down. But then he says that actually, they were worn pretty about the same, and later he even refers to them as equal. But deciding between two equal options feels arbitrary, and our brains don't like that. Remember, we need to find reasons for things, even if those reasons don't actually exist. So our speaker came up with a reason. His brain rationalized his decision, made it feel important, made his choice matter. According to his brain, there was a difference between the paths. He was a logical, rational, active participant in his own life. He made a choice, and that choice, according to his brain, made all the difference. But that choice didn't exist. Those final lines that everyone loves to quote, those are just the speaker's brain prescribing meaning and significance to something that isn't actually significant. And that's my interpretation. That's the interpretation that I think has more textual evidence for it. The paths were the same. The speaker said so. He made a decision based on the information he had, and then his brain decided that decision was important and rational. But it wasn't. Sometimes you just make a choice, and you have to live with that. Now, like I said at the beginning, there are no hard and fast right and wrongs in literary interpretation, but there are interpretations that have more or less evidence for them. And this is one of those cases. But this also isn't a free pass to be an ass on the internet. You don't have to prove people wrong when they use this common interpretation as their Instagram caption or whatever. If anything, just share this video with them. Sharing, liking, commenting, and subscribing really does help, and just as a heads up, I will be posting a blooper reel of clips of my cats when I reach 50,000 subscribers, so if you want to help make that happen, then go ahead and share this video with your friends. Anyway, if you want more of my poetry hot takes, or if you want to stay up to date with video progress, or just want pictures of my dog, then come follow me on Twitter at Zoe_the_bee, and if you want to help me make more videos, then you can come join us on Patreon, where you can get cool stuff like poems and polls and until next time, stay safe, stay warm, and I will see y'all again soon, I hope. Bye, folks.